Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the post news on 8th March newspaper front page Dawn. Dawn special report. In the crossfire, women journalists in Pakistan work in a hostile environment. Only the fittest can survive. By Shuja Jajja. Sometimes I think they just wanted to scare me, but when I think maybe they wanted me dead, says Bisma, a journalist well known for her progressive views. It was one evening in February 2019 when several shots were fired right outside her house. She has never spoken about the incident to anyone except her immediate family, her boss, and the head of the media company. She works for all of whom believe it was due to her reporting. It had been a year since Abisma had done a particular story and started getting threatening calls and telling her to watch out. The tone in which subsequent call turning more aggressive. I never thought they would show up at my doorstep, she says. Fearing further repercussions, she kept quiet and has since then drastically cut down her social media presence. The message was pretty clear. Such messages have become increasingly common and even more deadly. Over the years, Pakistan has earned a reputation of being a hard country for journalists. At least 61 reporters, all men, have been killed in the line of duty since 1992, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists. It ranked 145th out of 180 countries in Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index 2020. This is the first of several forthcoming cross-border collaboration with stories from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Like, while attacks on media men make it into the news and are discussed in appropriate forums, the mature nature of such attacks on women journalists, amplified by the uh, ingrained misogyny of a practical social structure, is very different. A survey on online violence against women journalists by the International Center for Journalists and UNESCO notes that online violence targeting women journalists manifests itself in a variety of ways, but it has a number of common characteristics. It is networked, it radiates, and it is intimate in detail and delivery. The threats are personal. They arrive on mobile phone screens, first thing in the morning and last thing at night, and they are often highly sexualized. Elsewhere, the report states there are three converging online threats currently confronting women journalists: misogynistic harassment and abuse, orchestrated disinformation and disinformation campaigns that exploit misogynistic narratives and digital privacy and security threats that increase physical risks associated with online violence. Most women journalists don't reach Attacks won't silence us. Illustration by Reem Khurshid. Out to saying, reporting is the easiest part. Far more difficult is the continuous battle to create and hold on to spaces with male-dominated newsrooms and public places, while fighting misinformation, deeply personal attacks, and misogyny, maybe misogyny. Uh, sorry, I have got my throat dried out. Both offline and online, which is overwhelming some of the most courageous and dedicated women journalists in Pakistan. On August 12 last year, a group of women journalists issued a statement against government affiliated social media accounts and supporters. Vicious attacks through social media are being directed at women journalists and commentators in Pakistan, making it incredibly difficult for us to carry out our professional duties, this statement said, adding, in what is certainly a well defined and coordinated campaign, personal details of women journalists and analyses have been made public to further discredit, frighten, and intimidators we are referred to as the peddlers of fake news, enemy of the people, and accused of taking bribes, often termed as paid journalists or lif- lifafas. The statement led to another round of virulent online abuse and harassment that was enough to make most women journalists, many of whom had not signed the petition, fearing backlash, worry that these threats could translate into real attacks. On September 9, nearly 150 women journalists signed a public petition and to endorse what our fellow colleagues have put on record on 12/8/2020 and widen the scope to reflect the magnitude and degree of trauma being experienced by women in media. Journalist criticism by any given policy of PTI or of political parties, including PMLN, PPP, religious parties, and accounts affiliated themselves with the institutions, may also unleash a barrage of abuse. The petition noted that political parties and their supporters who indulged in violent and vicious attacks online were impacting their work, mental well being, and scrutiny. If there was a World Cup for getting trolled, I would have won it. And quips Asma Shirazi, a signatory to the petition. The way a virus spreads, this nasty abuse has multiplied the same way. What has happened in the last 3 years has been unprecedented. Zuban band ho jaye kisi tarike se, our mouths should be gagged somehow. Um, most of flagship political talk show on Aaj News and one of the country's top-rated anchors, Shirazi, left PTV to join GeoTV in 2002 when there were hardly any women doing political reporting. In 2007, during Musharraf's rule, I was banned from TV along with some others. Back then, we would get threats. Someone would follow us, or a message would be delivered via messengers. But all records were smashed after 2011 when social media, especially Twitter, became big. Shirazi shares incidents of fake news and the propaganda against her, which not only hurt her credibility but also caused her immense mental stress. There is an extensive campaign to discredit pro democracy voices. I decided intentionally to let my voice be heard and push back, she says. I have been a victim of fake news so often I have gotten used to it. My private pictures are often doctored and leaked. I can't fight with the forces behind these attacks. All I can do is stand with the ideology I believe in. Attacks and harassment, the impact on female journalists and their reporting. A 2020 report based on a global survey by the International Women's Media Foundation and co-authored by Troll Busters found that out of the 597 respondents, a majority had been threatened, harassed, or physically attacked as a result of the work they do in the journalism or media field. 63% indicated they had been threatened or harassed online. 58% indicated they had been threatened or harassed in person, while 26% indicated they had been physically attacked. The report says 1 in 10 respondents has experienced a death threat in the past year. For women in Pakistan, there is no safe space. Contents Garida Farooqui, a popular current affairs talk show host on NEWS4, who says she was the first female journalist in Pakistan to file a complaint of cybercrime with the FIA. Abuses hurtle her way include allegations of extra-marital affairs with political figures. During the 2014 Dharna, accounts associated with PTI ran a campaign against me, and I was also physically attacked while reporting on the sit in, she says. Following the deadly attack on two Christchurch mosques in New Zealand, there were reports that the killer had earlier traveled to Pakistan when Farouk tweeted a CNN story about this. A storm of abuse remained down on her, calling her traitor and demanding she be tried for treason. In that case, too, she alleges a PTI supporter led the charge. Once again, she went to the FIA. However, by this time, the online harassment was no longer confined to Twitter and Facebook. It did not step outside the house for 3 months, she recalls. Many women journalists tell Dawn that whenever they write a political story or even tweet an opinion deemed unfavorable to the PTI or the other parties, the security establishment, or the corporate sector, they are mercilessly trolled. The backlash, which ranges from threatening phone calls to doxing, and in the case of political trolling, is amplified if verified party accounts jump in. Alia Zara, a Lahore-based journalist and managing editor of Nya Daur, a web-based news portal, agrees that the likelihood of online physical and sexual threats translating into real-time events is very high for the female reporters. Fortunately, unlike Shirazi and Faruqi, Zara is not a household name uh, on or an easily reorganized face except by one of the 20,000 online followers, but that has not made her feel any safer. When the Saudi Crown Prince was visiting, I wrote a report on censorship by news organizations on the subject of uh, Khashoggi's murder, says Zara. The next day, I got a call from an untraceable number asking how I could write something like this. He said in a threatening tone, "Our guest is visiting, and this isn't journalism, it's yellow journalism." The list of obscenities hold her vein, she maintains is getting longer and longer. Sometimes after tweeting something, she has to go offline for 48 hours until the verbal assault dies down, restricting her Twitter notifications is another tactic, but that leaves her unable to get tips and feedback from readers. Following a vlog she did on Ishaq Dar's BBC interview in December 2020, Zara says she was mercilessly trolled by the PTI's official account. They took out a portion of that video and edited it, making me sound like I was drunk. The result of all of this is that we are now very careful at near down. Self censorship has increased given that the number of red lines has multiplied. Hostile newsrooms. Many women reporters also describe the environment of the newsrooms as hostile. Male journalists can be their female colleagues' worst enemies. Pakistan's first female chief reporter and Karachi bureau chief Rafia Haider would certainly agree. With a career spanning 30 years at the Associated Press of Pakistan, the state run news agency, and she has reported extensively on health, environment, and the human rights. A mild mannered, a mild-mannered single woman, she also faces sexiest and ageist remarks, most of all, unfortunately, from the men in her newsroom. Her male colleagues are not keen on taking directions from a woman chief reporter. It has gone from bad to worse since I was made a bureau chief again in 2020. She was Pakistan's and APP's first female bureau chief a decade ago. She contends Heather has been repeatedly subjected to online and offline vilification campaigns. Laughably enough, my colleagues recently sent a letter to Prime Minister Imran Khan implying that I am a coronavirus denier and am forcing them to work in a pandemic when all I was doing was following orders from the head office, says Heather. A year away from retirement, she shares that these days she often contemplates quitting. Similarly, Multan-based Rakshanda Nair, a reporter with over 2 decades of experience at Nawai newspaper, accuses her colleagues of making it impossible for her to work. One day, she filed a story on challenges faced by female lawyers in her hometown, which ended up on the front page of Nawai Multan, as well as in all other editions. Many women journalists say that whenever they write a political story or even tweet an opinion deemed unfavorable to the political parties, the security establishment, or the corporate sector, they are mercilessly trolled. The backlash ranges from threatening phone calls to doxing. When I went to work, the Beats reporter was furious and threatened to break my legs. I will wound you. I will wound this face of yours so that she go around with. Were his words, she remembers. It took an intervention from several media colleagues to get the man to back off. But the resident editor actually asked me why I was interfering with his beat. The boys' club mentality means that male journalists often do not support their female colleagues, thereby leaving them feeling victimized twice over. Once I was doing a story on maternal health and talking to a pregnant woman in her home when her husband flashed me, says, Quetta-based reporter says a Quetta-based reporter. His wife pretended like nothing had happened. As I tried to leave, he made inappropriate gestures. Next day, a male reporter who was related to the family I had visited said I should behave respectably and this men. For female television reporters, stepping into the public domain also means facing crowds of leading men. Someone will try to touch your back or bottom, group you, or scream loudly in your ear, says Nahid, a young TV journalist. The worst are the cameramen who try to take advantage of the new girls by offering to adjust their collar mic. She remembers once pushing away a senior cameraman at a shoot when he tried to touch her neck, ostensibly while adjusting the mic. Similarly, experiences are narrated by other women reporters who said complaining meant being labeled difficult and losing out on choice assignments. Ifat Hassan Rizvi is a Supreme Court reporter well known in the Urdu media for her sharp political analysis. She has been a frequent target of online trolling, even for some innocuous comments. Unfortunately, respect for women journalists is scant. For instance, she says, no matter how smart a woman is, she is expected to report on Mausam Kahar, the weather. As for unwelcome male advances, even the House of Justice offer little refuge. A lawyer representing in the government in the Supreme Court once grabbed my hand while handing me a document. I was stunned and disgusted when I shared this with the male reporters, and they took it very lightly and said, "Ye sab Turkey hote hain," and suggested that the next time I take a man along, no support. The Protection Against Harassment of Women at the Workplace Act 2010 stipulates that every organization must adopt the code of conduct prescribed by the law and ensure it is displayed noticeably in languages understood by the majority of employees. Failure to do so is punishable by or pays 100,000 fine. In practice, many media houses are reluctant to comply with these directions. Talking to Don, provincial ombudsman Sindh, for protecting against harassment at work, retired Justice Shahnawaz Tariq says journalists, including women reporters, like many others working in the private sector, do not enjoy a legal protection from being easily terminated that are available to those working in the public sector if they file a complaint against harassment at the workplace. The fear of losing employment and possibly killing one's career prospects acts as a deterrent which discourages the women from coming forward. Consider that over the years, 461 cases overall have been filed under the Harassment Act 2010, with the provincial ombudsman with 350 disposed. In all that time, only one case involved in a media company and a female radio host has been lost with the provincial ombudsman, and the case was decided in her favor, and the accused convicted. No response was received from the Office of the Federal Ombudsman for Protection Against Harassment of Women at Workplace, Kashmala Tariq, for this report. Journalists in Pakistan as a whole are going through difficult times, let alone the wholesale assault on freedom of speech by the authorities. Salaries have been drastically cut and massive retrenchments have taken place in media organizations. For many women in this cohort, however, the situation is even more fraught with the trolling they face on a daily basis and the lack of support from the male colleagues, who are in fact often part of the problem. On August 12, 2020, in response to the statement issued by the women journalists about the vile online attacks on them, Minister for Human Rights Shiri Mazari tweeted, disturbing to learn of women journalists being targeted and abused, um, abusing women because they are critical is never acceptable. Journalists to do their job and to target them, especially gender-based abusive attacks on women junior journalists is absolutely unacceptable and disgusting. However, little has happened since then to show that the government is committed to improve the environment of women journalists in public and online spaces. Repeated attempts to contact Ms. Mazari for comments on the subject did not receive any response. For women in Pakistani media, most days are like climbing a personal Everest, navigating harsh terrain. Navigating harsh terrain and bottlenecks, where the slightest misstep can put paid to one's job, reputation, and sanity. Their experiences of offline and online abuse are dismissed as occupational hazards. And that is unacceptable. Pakistani social media is a disturbing reflection of a troubled society, averts into differing opinions, and obsessed with harassing government in ways unimaginable. A glance through the WhatsApp messages and timelines of women journalists is proof enough. They need assurance from their employers as well as from the state that when they share their fears and experiences of being doxxed, trolled, surveilled, or physically attacked, and they are not dismissed as being paranoid and asked to toughen up. Instead, their tormentors must be brought to book. Name changed for the sake of privacy. The Twitter is a member of staff. Longer versions of these stories with more visuals can be accessed on dawn.com. And in the end, the formal request, if you have not yet, please subscribe our channel and press the like and bell button to get the fresh from us. Thank you for watching. Have a nice time. Goodbye.